New Zealand's infrastructure debate is dominated by a multi-billion-dollar Three Waters funding gap. Aging pipes, recurring overflows, drought-exposed supply and seismic/climate vulnerability sit on top of councils whose ratepayer bases cannot fund renewal. The competing camps split into two genuinely different questions: who should own and run the assets, the structural consolidation fight that produced Three Waters and its repeal, and how the work gets paid for financing reform, user pays pricing, demand management, alongside the engineering camps that just want the pipes renewed and the lifelines hardened. The recurring pattern is that the delivery wrapper churns on a partisan cycle while the underlying funding gap stays put, so the durable solutions are the financing and pricing tools that every government finds useful rather than the agency restructures that define each government against the last. They take water off councils and consolidate into dedicated entities. The binding constraint is scale and balance sheet capacity. Small, fragmented council water operations cannot raise the debt or expertise to fund multi-generational renewal. Removing water from general council functions and consolidating it into ring-fenced, professionally run, separately borrowing entities lets the sector reach viable scale and borrow against water revenue rather than the council's constrained balance sheet. Its flagship moves are: aggregate council water services into a small number of dedicated water entities, the Three Waters model, 4 then 10 entities with iwi co-governance, council-owned water organisations, CCO, with ring-fenced balance sheets borrowing off-book against water revenue, the local water done well model that replaced Three Waters, independent economic regulation and mandatory minimum service/quality standards, Aotearoa, to drive renewal regardless of owner. The central tension, ownership and co-governance versus equal citizenship and local control. The structural reform that delivers scale also triggers the sharpest values fight in NZ politics: iwi co-governance, loss of council asset control, so the vehicle is welded to a values cleavage that guarantees reversal even though the underlying scale problem is real. This has been tried. Labour's Three Waters, 4 then 10 entities with mandated iwi co-governance, was legislated in 2022, became a flashpoint, and was repealed in 2024 before operationalising. It was replaced by the coalition's local water done well, council-owned ring-fenced CCOs, co-governance dropped, financially separate borrowing retained. The structural plus values reform churned fast. The multi-billion funding gap it was meant to close remains unsolved. This sits on the rulebook's worst of both worlds intersection: machinery of government restructure co-governance, values cleavage late-term partisan passage against organised opposition. Its durability outlook is rated likely reversed. Long-term infrastructure financing reform, bonds, tenor value capture, PPP. The funding gap is primarily a financing problem, not a resources problem. Multi-generational assets are being funded out of annual budgets, so they get deferred. Matching the financing horizon to the asset life, through long-tenor bonds, Crown-guaranteed borrowing, land value capture and public-private partnerships, spreads cost across the generations that benefit and removes the annual budget pressure that drives deferral. Its flagship moves are: Crown-guaranteed long duration, 30, 50-year, infrastructure bonds, and extending LGFA loan tenors to 40 years for qualifying Three Waters and transport assets, land value capture value uplift levies, hypothecating a share of infrastructure-driven land, uplift to the funding pool, public-private partnership structures for treatment plants and asset delivery, private capital and efficiency, public ownership retained, targeted Crown grant programs for renewal in high deprivation and small council areas. The central tension, intergenerational equity and debt discipline. Long-term debt defers cost to future ratepayers who cannot consent, so it is durable only if matched to durable assets and not used to plug operating shortfalls. Value capture is methodologically and politically contested, which uplift is attributable to public investment, and PPPs trade higher private financing cost for delivery capacity. This has been partly tried. The financing tools have a mixed track record. The local government funding agency and council debt are long established and durable. The current local water done well reform explicitly turns on letting council water CCOs borrow off-book against water revenue, a financing framework move. But land value capture has been proposed across multiple reviews, and the shelved 2023 Future for Local Government report, and never legislated at scale, and broad PPP use in water remains limited. Financing/fiscal framework reforms are the high durability category in the rulebook because every successor finds them useful and absorbs rather than abolishes them. Its durability outlook is rated likely durable. User pays cost-reflective pricing and demand management. Infrastructure is systematically underpriced. Water, wastewater and roads are supplied at below cost or zero marginal price, generating excess demand and starving the network of renewal revenue. Cost-reflective pricing, volumetric water tariffs, universal road user charges, stormwater levies, simultaneously curbs wasteful demand and raises the revenue to fund the network, while metering, leak detection and efficiency standards stretch existing capacity. A 20% demand cut equals a 20% capacity increase at near zero capital cost. Its flagship moves are progressive volumetric water pricing with a free lifeline block and cost-reflective tiers above it, universal road user charging across all vehicles to replace fuel excise as the fleet electrifies, maintaining transport revenue neutrality, stormwater charges by impervious surface area, plus large-scale leak/non-revenue water detection and district metering, water-efficient appliance and building standards for new development. The central tension, efficiency versus regressivity, cost-reflective pricing for essential services is regressive unless paired with explicit lifeline blocks and low-income protections, and the transition to full cost recovery means visible price rises that hit fixed-income households first, the political hazard that makes pricing reform a manufactured loser problem. This has been partly tried. Volumetric water charging is already normalized in Auckland and several centres and has proven durable where embedded, because metered users acquire a personal stake in fair pricing. The government has signalled moving all vehicles onto road user charges as EV uptake erodes fuel excise. But universal RUC and broad stormwater/full cost recovery pricing remain incomplete and politically sensitive, repeatedly slowed by affordability concerns. No nationwide cost-reflective water regime has been imposed top-down. Its durability outlook is rated likely contested. Accelerated renewal and capacity build, engineering first. These are engineering problems that need engineering solutions, not reorganization. Finish the trunk projects, lift the pipe renewal rate to keep pace with aging assets, expand treatment and storage ahead of growth, and reinforce the grid. The economic and environmental cost of deferred renewal and overflow events exceeds the cost of timely investment, so the answer is simply to fund and build the work backlog. Its flagship moves are complete trunk projects, Auckland's Central Interceptor, and fund the downstream network upgrades needed to realise their full benefit, lift annual pipe renewal rate to ~1. 5% of network double Wellington Water's renewal from ~55 km to ~110 km a year to clear the backlog over 20-30 years. Expand water storage, e.g. 120-day drought supply and treatment capacity ahead of population growth, reinforce transmission and sub-transmission, Transpower program, CBD cable N1 redundancy, and add local generation. The central tension, it is a funding problem wearing an engineering costume. Every renewal target implies large, sustained rate increases or Crown support, and runs into construction workforce capacity limits, and visible megaprojects can crowd out the unglamorous distributed renewal that actually clears the backlog, so this camp cannot stand alone without one of the financing or pricing camps to pay for it. This has been tried. Renewal and capacity build is the perennial baseline activity, not a discrete reform. The Central Interceptor is being completed, and councils run continuous renewal programs. The honest finding is that this approach is never abolished, but is chronically underdelivered. Deferred maintenance feedback loops, emergency repairs eat the renewal budget, driving more deferral, and workforce limits mean the renewal rate persistently falls short of what the asset base requires. It is the activity the structural and financing reforms are all ultimately trying to fund. Its durability outlook is rated likely durable. Seismic, climate and lifeline resilience hardening. NZ's critical infrastructure is systematically under-engineered for combined seismic and climate hazard exposure. Targeted resilience investment, hardening or bypassing critical utility fault crossings, building redundant supply routes, pre-positioning emergency water, and lifting design standards above pre-1990 levels buys weeks not months post-disaster recovery and avoids the cascading isolation seen at Kaikoura and in Cyclone Gabrielle. Its flagship moves are harden or bypass critical utility crossings of the Wellington Fault, water, gas, electricity, and build dual/redundant supply routes. Pre-position emergency water storage systems at community hubs and stand up lifeline utility investment programs. Resilience upgrade strategic ports and lifeline transport links against alpine fault coastal flooding risk. Raise infrastructure design standards for combined seismic climate loading. The central tension, paying now for a low probability, high consequence event, large upfront capital for a disaster that may not strike this cycle, competes directly with routine maintenance budgets, and the benefit is invisible until catastrophe. The classic prevention spending problem, where the defending constituency only materializes after the event that the spending was meant to preempt. This has been partly tried. Resilience hardening is pursued in bursts triggered by disasters. The Wellington Lifelines Group and post-Gabrielle recovery funding are real, but it is chronically underfunded between events. The rulebook's crisis/forcing function rule applies. A disaster can launch a wave of resilience spending, but the crisis does not make the spending durable, and once the event recedes, the low probability/high-cost calculus pushes it back behind routine maintenance. Most fault crossing and lifeline upgrades remain incomplete. Its durability outlook is rated likely durable, closing the rural digital connectivity gap. Below the commercial viability density threshold, the market will not build, so rural broadband and mobile gaps persist despite successive initiatives. Public subsidy or direct investment, extending fiber to rural settlements, subsidizing or mandating provision in new subdivisions, and funding community-owned networks is needed to deliver genuine digital inclusion and economic participation where private build-out stalls. Its flagship moves are: extend the ultra-fast broadband rural broadband program to rural settlements above a premises threshold via targeted Crown top-up subsidy, mandate fibre provision as a condition of greenfield subdivision consent above a lot threshold, fund community-owned fibre networks in isolated settlements through contestable grants, targeted rural broadband mobile blackspot investment in the most underserved regions. The central tension, cost per premise versus reach. Rural fibre costs 5-20 times the urban build, so subsidizing it at scale diverts money from interventions that reach far more households per dollar, and fibre mandates raise subdivision costs that can choke marginal rural housing supply, the equity of reach versus efficiency trade-off. This has been tried. This is one of the more durable infrastructure programs in the set. UFB and the Rural Broadband Initiative, ran across both Labour and national governments, were extended rather than repealed, and are treated as a continuing public investment commitment. The honest caveat is that coverage gaps persist below the viability threshold precisely because each round funds the next cheapest premises and the truly remote tail stays on satellite, so the program endures but never fully closes the gap. Its durability outlook is rated likely durable.